Hello, comrades. Numbers. Love them or hate them, there is no escape. Unless you're planning to vanish into the Russian taiga or disappear into a dacha in the Magadan Oblast, you'll need numbers, or better yet, numerals. So, what exactly is a numeral? Glad you asked. A numeral is a word that represents a number. It's how we say things like 2 or 17 instead of holding up fingers. In this video, you'll learn Russian numerals with a primary focus on counting, while also touching on related contexts such as telling time, expressing quantities, giving phone numbers, and working with basic math. To learn to count in Russian, we'll go through this working table that takes you from the humble 0 all the way up to some frankly unsettling numbers, the kind that only come up when discussing national debt. We'll discuss how each numeral is used in Russian, how to say it properly, pronunciation is a battle of its own, and a few tips so you don't mix up 15 with 50 when ordering slices of bread for your borscht. The first column, 0 to 10, is the paramount one we need to master first because the words here are not just the most common Russian numerals, but also the foundation on which numerals from the subsequent columns are formed. Also, we'll need to discuss the first 3 numerals on the list a bit more because they have commonly used alternative forms. In Russian, we call these numerals from the first column simple numerals, not because they are so simple, even a brown bear could learn them, but because they consist of one word and are not built from other numerals. In English, they call them the same for the same reason. First, listen, or if you are eager, repeat after me the following simple numerals from 0 to 10, and then we shall talk about them in proper detail. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. First, let's point out 0, 1, 2, which I've grouped together in this illustration using parentheses, because these numerals, unlike the others in this group, are special. They have more than one variant, and you should know these alternative variants because they are commonly used in Russian. First, the numeral 0 has an alternative variant, nul. Both versions can be used in Russian. However, 0 with O is the standard, while nul with U is far less common. What keeps nul in the language is its use in certain common phrases and expressions, idioms, technical terminology, and older texts. So the default variant 0 is the one you should use in your active vocabulary, whether counting, expressing quantity, or giving a phone number. The rare variant null should be part of your passive vocabulary, meaning you should know it exists and recognize its use in rare contexts. As for 1, 1, it starts with the sound a as in up, because in Russian, o in unstressed positions is pronounced as a short a, like in sun. The special feature of 1 is that it has alternative forms, 3 gendered forms, masculine, feminine, neuter, 1, одна, одно. Additionally, it has the plural form, одни, used for plural-only items, for example, a pair of jeans, which makes it possible to say 1 jeans in Russian. Одни джинсы. The default masculine form 1 is the main one. It's used for counting, doing math, and giving your phone number, so you won't need the other forms as often. Yet sometimes you will need them, of course. For example, if you want to express the quantity of 1, say 1 house, 1 book, 1 word, and 1 pair of jeans, in Russian we use different forms of 1. For example, 1 дом, одна книга, одно слово одни джинсы. Russian is a gendered language, and in Russian, gender is everything. If you've studied gender, there is nothing special in these examples, just good old gender. If not, you need to learn this topic, of course. Another alternative variant of one used specifically for counting is раз, because when counting out loud, Russian speakers typically say раз instead of один. The word раз literally means time or occurrence, as in один раз, one time. You'll hear it in various situations. In general, it's a common pattern in languages where people prefer a short one-syllable version of one for counting. But be aware that раз can replace один only for counting, not in other contexts where you must use один, not раз. So if you count like один, два, три, it won't be wrong, of course. But Russians typically say раз, два, три, where the final consonant z in раз is pronounced as s because consonants are devoiced at word ends in Russian. The next numeral, два. Even though for counting and in most situations like saying your phone number, the default masculine variant, два, as in the table, is used, два is also special because it has an alternative feminine variant, две, which is used when describing the quantity of something feminine. This pattern of division into два and две is at least 4,000 years old, so don't look for any modern logic here. For example, when we say the time 2:02, for the hour part we use два, masculine as in the table, and for the minute part we use the alternative feminine variant две. We say два because час, hour, is masculine, and две because minuta, minute, is feminine. So when saying a time like 2:02, we always omit the first zero for hours, but pronounce the zero for minutes. 2:02. Similarly, for the time час 01, we use the feminine version одна for minutes. Interestingly, 1 hour is special in Russian because we prefer to say час, hour, instead of saying один. So, час 01. So for 2, the default gender is masculine, два, as in the table. So when counting, doing math, or giving your phone number, use this default masculine form. Yet the feminine form will sometimes be needed as well, as in 2:02, for example. Okay, masculine, feminine. What about the neuter then? The neuter form of два does not exist. Instead, the masculine variant два is used. For instance, to taxi would be два такси. As for our counting skill, using the numerals we've introduced, we count один, два, or раз, два. As for the remaining numerals in this column, 3 to 10, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, they follow a straightforward pattern, meaning they have no alternative variants. For example, when doing math, you can use them straightforwardly as in the table. Сколько 2 плюс 1? 2 плюс 1 равно 3. Сколько 8 минус 6? 8 минус 6 равно 2. So in Russian, сколько means how much or how many, plus is plus, minus is minus, and равно means equals. As for counting, with this column we can count to 10. Раз, два, три, четыре, пять, шесть, семь, восемь, девять, 10. Where for better pronunciation of the soft sign, especially for those numerals that end in t, Move the tip of the tongue to the lower incisors when pronouncing T. 5, 6, 9, 10. Now let's review the second column of our list of Russian numerals, which covers numbers from 11 to 19. As you can see, we borrow the previous 1 to 9 numerals and add 12 to all of them. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. As you can see, we use parts of the previous 1 to 9 numerals and simply add 12 to them. Na means on, it's always present in all these numerals. Then we say tsat, but do not pronounce the de for ease of articulation. The suffix tsat goes back etymologically to 10. It's actually what remains of the old word 10 after people started speaking faster and shortening frequently used words. So even though tsat doesn't look much like 10, it still means 10. Therefore, all these numerals from 10 to 19 mean something like 1 on 10, 2 on 10, 3 on 10, and so on. So in 11, where we pronounce the double N as a single N, we take 1 from the previous column and add 12. 11. For 12, we take the feminine dve from the previous column and add 12. 12. For 13, we take 3 from the previous column and add 13. 13. For 14, we take 4 without the final vowel and add 12. 14. For the rest, we have another similar pattern. That's why I've added a parenthesis here. We take the initial numeral without the soft sign and add 12. Therefore, for 15, we take 5 without the soft sign and add 12. 15. For 16, in which we do not pronounce the P for ease of articulation, we take 6 without the soft sign and add 12. 16. For 17, we take 7 without the soft sign and add 12. 17. For 18, we take 8 without the soft sign and add 12. 18. For 19, we take 9 without the soft sign and add 12. 19. In most of these numerals, the stress falls on the a in 12. However, 11 and 14 are exceptions. In these two, the stress shifts to the second syllable. In the rest, the stress mark appears above the a in 12. Now, some real-world examples. Returning to math. Сколько 10 плюс 4? 14. Сколько 19 минус 7? 12. As for telling time in the 24-hour system, examples include 13, 19, 16, 11, 18, 12, 15, 14, 17, 13. As for pronunciation, you can see that all these numerals end in T. To improve its pronunciation, place the tip of your tongue against the lower front teeth. This way, you'll produce the sound with the body of the tongue. That's how a Russian native speaker does it. The next column is 20 to 90. Here we have a bit more variety as we have 2 patterns and 2 exceptions. Let's read these numerals first. 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. 90. Okay, so for 20 and 30, we have the same pattern where we use the suffix "цать", which refers to 10 from the previous column. So for 20, we take the default masculine "два" and add the suffix "цать", equaling to tens. For 30, we take 3 and add "цать", 3 tens. As for 40, we simply need to remember this word as it is an exception. The numeral 40 has uncertain etymology, but the most common theory links it to the history of fur trading in ancient Rus, where the early Slavs used a specific unit of measurement for counting the pelts of fur-bearing animals called sorak. This term originally referred to a sack or piece of cloth in which pelts were wrapped. Such a bundle contained exactly 40 pelts, mainly sable, enough to make a single fur coat. That's the mainstream explanation for why the word sorak became associated with the number sorak, 40, and eventually replaced the older form 40 for tens, becoming the norm roughly 500-600 years ago. Next, for 50, we take 5 and add десят, a counterpart to both цать and десять that is visually almost identical to 10, десять, lacking only the soft sign. These numerals survived the emergence of цать during language evolution and retained the old pattern instead of shifting to the new one. Likewise, for 60, we take 6 and add десят. Here we do not pronounce the T with the soft sign for ease of articulation, so 60. For 70, we take 7 and add десят, 70. For 80, we take 8 and add десят, 80. As for 90, this pattern is special because instead of meaning 9 dozen, it is essentially 9 onto 100, as it employs the 100, 100 from the next column. So we take the initial part of 9 without the t at the end and add 100, 90. This numeral 90 is special as similarly to 40, it differs from most Slavic languages and its etymology is even less clear. The main theories suggest a gravitation of this numeral toward 100 because of its proximity to 100, as in this quantity is almost 100. Another hypothesis suggests that ancient Slavs may have counted in nines, as counting in nines is a concept reflected in folk tales. That's it for this column. And now you can, for example, say times like 19 50, 18 40, or 13 30. Or you can practice Russian on the streets of Chelyabinsk, for instance, by opening conversations with strangers. Где автобус номер 50? Where is bus number 50? But what if you want to ask, where is bus number 51? Or say the time, 9:34. For that you need compound numerals, numerals that consist of 2 or more words. These are not difficult as they are formed in a simple way, by placing the required numerals one after another as separate words without any punctuation. So to say 24, we simply take 20 and add 4. 24, 2 words. Similarly, 96 is 96, 2 separate words. So while numerals we've covered so far are used directly, as in this table, compound numerals like 81 or 96 are formed by placing the numerals one after another as separate words without any punctuation. So we do not use a hyphen, as in English, just separate words. Using compound numerals, you can now count up to 99, say the time in full, like 4 – 59, 11 – 26, 12 – 34, or state the number of your favorite basketball player. But since prices are going up in Russia, you cannot buy much for 99 rubles, 99 рублей, so we need to move forward simply to be able to afford living. The next column is from 100 to 900. Let's read it first. 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900. 100 is the first numeral here and means 100. Yet we do not literally say 100, just 100. As for 200, as you see, we take the feminine две and add sti, which translates to 200. This is a special form from the distant past, a remnant of the dual grammatical number that required a special form for 2. The remaining numerals directly rely on the word 100, 100, while employing the grammatical rules of the genitive case used to express multiple quantity in Russian. If you are an intermediate student, the patterns you see are familiar to you. But if you are a beginner, you need to simply remember them. As for the logic, this sta is what 100 becomes in the genitive singular, sot is what 100 becomes in genitive plural. Therefore, 300 and 400 can be translated as 300 and 400, while 500, 600, and the rest can be translated as 500s, 600s, etc. So for 300, we take 3 and add sta, 300. For 400, we take 4 and add sta, 400. Then for 500 to 900, we have a pattern. Take numerals from the first column and add sot, which is the genitive plural of 100. Therefore, for 500, we take 5 and add sot. For 600, in which we don't pronounce t for ease of articulation, we take 6 and add sot, 600. For 700, we take 7 and add sot, 700. For 800, we take 8 and add sot, 800. For 900, we take 9 and add sot, 900. With this column, you can now read and say phone numbers. While in English, people usually read phone numbers digit by digit, 21254539007, in Russian, people don't say each digit separately. Instead, we read phone numbers according to how they are grouped. And in Russian, they are grouped a bit differently than in English. For example, +7 495 123 45 67 or 8 929 218 13 36. So we literally say 8 929 218 13 36. Now, what do Russian phone numbers look like in real life? Since Russian numbers can appear in several formats, whether in everyday local use, official documents, international contexts, or simply depending on the person who wrote them, you'll typically see something like this. There are 10 digits. The first digit refers to Russia, the country code. The next 3 digits indicate the region or mobile operator, though because of number portability, a person can keep their number even if they switch operators or regions. So today it's more of a formal marker. And the remaining digits form the subscriber number, unique to the customer. The first digit 8 or Plus 7 is basically two ways of dialing the same thing. Plus 7 is the international code for Russia. Inside Russia, though, people often replace it with a simple 8, used for non-local calls. Even though plus 7 is international and 8 is domestic, plus 7 can be used universally for both international and domestic calls. So for you personally, I'd recommend using plus 7 only. Think of 8 as more of a colloquial or folk habit. In Russia, the canonical way of writing phone numbers follows the 13322 grouping. So if you come to Russia and get a SIM card with the following number, it would be pronounced as plus 7 916 987 6503, or in English plus 7 916 987 6503. So if a zero precedes a digit, you pronounce it separately. Another example, plus 7 495 698 0620. So yes, with the added numerals from this column, you are equipped to say your phone number. Now the last column of numerals, which runs from 1000 to a trillion. There are only 4 words here. Тысяча, миллион, миллиард, триллион. Тысяча is the first numeral here, a good ancient Slavic word that comes from the same root as the English thousand. Million is an internationalism, so it's easy to remember. Milliard is also an internationalism, so it's easy to remember as well. While in English the word milliard has been replaced by billion by the end of the 18th century, in Russian we still use the good old version of this word, milliard. Trillion is trillion, like in English, but the word stress is different. Trillion. Yet, what's important in using these numerals in practice, for example for counting, is that they have gender and follow standard Russian grammar rules. This makes them a bit complicated as you often cannot use them directly in their default form. Тысяча ends in a, meaning it is feminine, while million, milliard, and trillion are masculine as they end in a consonant. So, to be able to count using these numerals, I need to remind you once again about the genitive case we touched on earlier, which is used in Russian for expressing plural quantity. To change the case of a word, we change its grammatical ending. This means that when counting, we will have to change the final parts of these words. For an A2 level student, what I'm about to explain is as easy as pie because we are going to apply the standard genitive, nothing unusual. If you are a beginner, you can either remember these alternative forms or at least get acquainted with the information I'm about to present, so you can understand how and why these numerals change in Russian and at least develop passive recognition. For the quantity of 1, we do not need the genitive, because genitive is used for quantities other than 1. So you say тысяча, миллион, миллиард, триллион, as they are in the table. By default, we do not say 1000 and 1 million in Russian, just 1000 and a million. In general, it's very common in Russian for 1 to be omitted. For example, when asking the time, сколько времени? Час. Instead of saying 1 o'clock, we typically just say an hour, as you can see. Returning to our numerals, it's not a mistake if you say 1000. So if you want, it could be 1 тысяча, 1 миллион, 1 миллиард, 1 триллион, where for 1 тысяча, we use the feminine version of 1 because тысяча is feminine. As for using the genitive for plural quantity, the genitive case treats the quantities of 2, 3, 4 as grammatically singular, while other quantities like 5 to 9, 0, the teens, 11 to 19, and higher numbers like 20 or 200 are treated as grammatically plural. As for 2, 3, and 4, considering them grammatically singular is an ancient, even prehistoric tradition that comes from viewing small quantity as closer to one than to many. So genitive singular is a way of saying a few or a handful. According to this rule, for the quantities of 2, 3, 4 with тысяча, we use the genitive singular, so the vowel a is replaced with и in the feminine. Therefore, we say 2000, 3000, 4000. Then, for the quantities above 4, the genitive plural comes into play, for which we remove a. 5000, 6000, 7000, 11 тысяч, 19 тысяч, 40 тысяч, 100 тысяч, 200 тысяч, and so on. As for compound numerals, even though genitive singular is used for 2, 3, 4, meaning a few, in compound numerals it can be used even for big numbers, because in compound numerals only the final numeral in the sequence matters grammatically. So we choose our final genitive singular or plural form based on the last numeral in the sequence. For example, 21 тысяча, no genitive. 32 тысячи, genitive singular. 43 тысячи, 55 тысяч, genitive plural. 667 тысяч. So in a compound numeral, we pay attention to the last numeral in the sequence. If it's 1, we do not apply genitive, одна тысяча. For 2, 3, 4, including compound numerals, we apply genitive singular, 32 тысячи. For 5 to 9 and above, we apply genitive plural, 45 тысяч. To solidify this logic, let me very quickly explain the same for the masculine million, миллиард, trillion. Since they are all masculine, the logic for these three is exactly the same. For 1, no genitive. 1 миллион, 1 миллиард, 1 trillion. For 2, 3, 4, or compound numerals that end in 2, 3, 4, genitive singular, where for masculine nouns we add a to the consonant. 2 миллиона, 3 миллиарда, 4 триллиона. For quantities of 5 to 9 and above, or 0, genitive plural, where for masculine nouns we add of. 9 миллионов, 40 миллиардов, 200 триллионов, 0 миллионов. And for compound numerals, we look at the final numeral in the sequence. 101 миллион, no genitive, 202 миллиарда, genitive singular, 305 триллионов, genitive plural. Before finishing the video, let me give you an important practical tip that applies to contexts like entering a number when paying your bill or tax in Russia, submitting meter readings, or simply reading numbers, because the way decimals and large numbers are written differs between Russian and English. The number pi, for example, is written as 3.14 in English, but in Russian it appears as 3,14. In other words, Russian uses a comma instead of a period as the decimal separator. However, in practice, this rule isn't strictly followed, since you'll often see a point instead, for instance on price tags. But when entering a payment amount digitally, be aware that using a decimal point instead of a comma may cause issues, especially if automatic correction doesn't apply. In such cases, you'll need to manually replace the point with a comma to ensure the format is accepted. For example, to pay a tax of 5,936 rubles and 72 kopecks, you would enter this number, yielding 5936 рублей 72 копейки. A discrepancy shows up in large numbers as well. While in English, a comma visually separates large numbers like 2 million, in Russian we don't use a comma for this purpose, since the comma is reserved for decimals. Instead, we use a space, as in this example, 2 миллиона. So, starting from 1000, a space can be inserted in the way you see on the screen, meaning that, like in English, we can visually group digits for easier reading. But we use a space instead of a comma as the separator. Yet, the visual separation is used passively, simply to show big numbers for convenience, for example, on your computer screen. So, to send a friend 2600 rubles, you would enter 2600 without a dash, 2600. However, a dash will likely appear on the screen automatically after you enter the number, simply for your convenience. And here's the final tip. If you want to count backward, say minus before each numeral. Минус 1, минус 2, минус 3, and so on. Now you've got the tools to count confidently in Russian up to whatever number you want. Additionally, you've seen how numerals appear in all kinds of real-life contexts, like phone numbers, quantities, time, and math. I'll see you in the next video if you are a subscriber, or in person if you are a student. Пока!